Hello, hello, fellow listeners and viewers. This episode is dedicated to advocacy and its importance to our human condition. What is advocacy and why is it important? Advocacy is people power. People power is advocacy. Advocacy is more than just a cause, as it brings about social change. It's a commitment to making a difference in the world. Advocacy is important because it creates a sense of urgency around critical issues, mobilizing people to take action and pressuring those decision makers to make very important policy changes. Advocacy also provides a platform for marginalized or underrepresented groups to have their voices heard and their needs addressed. In today's episode, I had a revealing conversation with Dr. Charlene Bennett, who I consider to be an agent of social change. She's actually the co-founder and CEO of Individual Advocacy Group, and she shared with us practical ways in which she has been advocating for persons with disabilities over the past 45 years. Now, mind you, she looks absolutely nothing like it. Needless to say, Dr. Bennett and her team provide comprehensive support in 21 counties in Illinois, as well as the District of Columbia and Maryland, where they ensure that those vulnerable groups are able to achieve their full potential and lead meaningful lives. During our conversation, one of Dr. Bennett's life lessons is that if you have a will, there is a way. And I've personally been ruminating on that life lessons since we spoke. If there is a will, there's definitely a way. This is Impact 360, and I'm your host, Klandine. Let's get into it. Welcome, Dr. Bennett. It's nice to have you with us today. We're meeting today on the heels of Bob Marley's biopic One Love, which was released in theaters only a couple of days ago. In one of his interviews, he said when he gets up on stage, he preaches about one love, one heart, one destiny. He said his life is only important if he can help plenty people. My life is important if I can help plenty people. And that if his life is for his own security, he doesn't want it. He said his life is for the people. His son, Damien Jr. Gang, later went on to reiterate the infamous One Love song. That it's really about having a mutual respect for humanity. How do you compare these words with what you're currently doing at Individual Advocacy Group?
Well, I'd like to say that we chose to support people that society as a general or historically has kept away from society. Historically, there have been so many persons with an intellectual disability and other co-occurring mental health issues that were segregated from society. It was viewed as a commonplace to have people with certain types of disabilities to live in institutional settings with maybe 200, 300, 400 other people, not being included in a community, not being included with just the regular things that you and I would do. So from my perspective and our perspective, one love means one love for everyone. It should not exclude any group of human beings because people are people first. All people together have the same desires to feel loved, to be wanted, to be contributing members to society, to be accepted for who he or she or they are. And so part of our big mission is to provide the advocacy and support to help and support people to live in communities, to be part of a community, to work in communities, and to be active members of a community, because traditionally so many of these folks have been excluded.
Absolutely. I'm sure you've now piqued the interest of the audience. So please tell us, what or who inspired Charlene Bennett to become Dr. Charlene Bennett, who's now a trailblazer in advocating for said marginalized group of individuals?
Well, I would say I've always had the deep desire from as long as I can remember to support people that I felt were always excluded or mistreated, or people that most of traditional society didn't want to bother with. And it came from inside. It came from a place of intense passion and desire to make that difference. In my past and in my state, which is Illinois, I had a position in government that went around to multiple places to observe firsthand how people live. This was many years back, way back in the 80s. And I got to see people when they lived in certain settings, larger institutional settings or settings 300-400 people. And it so bothered me. It was so intense of a response, because these human beings, you could just see it in their eyes that, this is not where they wanted to be. I also observed that many of the conditions were just deplorable. I observed how, unfortunately, some staff talk to people. I saw things at that time, people of all different sizes wearing each other's clothes. I saw people being changed and bathed in front of people they didn't know. I mean, I don't want to upset the audience here, but it just bothered me. Why do people have to live this way? It didn't make sense to me. My colleague, Dr. Brooks, at the time, we shut down some of those places. We believe that if you treat people with humanity and kindness, but also provide what support they need, that everybody should have a chance to live that type of life in a community, and not be shunned away from society. So it is something, from my perspective, that was always there. But as I observed and saw, it just was something that I believed we had to do differently.
Following that up, I'm going to continue to pay homage to Bob Marley and his advocacy for people power. As you so rightly put it, he's also sang, "Get up, stand up for your rights," when others are not in a position to get up and stand up for their rights, which is what you're alluding to. You seem to be doing that for them, right? Walk us through what that process looks like in the general sense, and then take us through what it looks like in the typical sense, meaning your every day-to-day operations.
We support hundreds and hundreds of people, and each person comes with their life story and their history and their desire to be accepted. And so what it looks like, and it really does depend on each person. We've had persons that have come to us from pretty intense backgrounds. We've had persons that have come to us who, for an example, had extreme abuse and trauma in their histories. They're sad, and these are people with intellectual disabilities and other types of problems. And it takes courage for the community of staff that we have to want to support people that may have such pain on the inside and act out because they're afraid of people. They're afraid that someone's going to hit them or hurt them or abuse them. So what it looks like first is to make a connection with the person, to get to and where that person really wants to live, and build a team around that person in a home with employees to support them, and connecting and working through the trauma and working through getting to know the desires of the person, and then helping that person, supporting that person to live their life. It's not always easy because people that have lived with that kind of background and pain, and again, this is a very specialized human beings we're talking about. Not all people with intellectual disabilities fall in this category, but what we do have supported people that are more of the more traumatized, more behaviorally challenged, and where a lot of people don't want to do it because it's too difficult or too challenging, too hard, too this, too that. And so the process really is one of giving people opportunities, staying with people through trials and tribulations, and probably equally as important is finding the right group of staff and empowering that staff to understand that mission and supporting those staff to work through some of those issues with those persons. Mm-hmm. And so the process really is one of exploring human conditions, exploring what people, making sure you have the right chemistry of people working to support that person, and then advocate. Because what we have found in the history of our organization, that it's just not the person that needs the advocacy, but some communities don't want quote unquote people like them and they're on their block. Or want, we as an organization had a suicide.
We're going to get into that shortly. Yeah. Absolutely.
So they want these folks in the community. And what makes us different is we've always believed, regardless of person's capabilities, that people have the right to live in their own home rather than our organization saying, it's our home, you could be a guest in our home.
Right.
Work and advocate for, we have a whole housing division where we work with community landlords to say, we're the advocates, we'll make sure your bills get paid, but we want folks to live in their own home, their own so they don't ever have to worry about being kicked out.
Or without zoning restrictions and such, without zoning restrictions and all that craziness.
People don't always, as we know, people are afraid of differences. People don't always want to give each other a chance.
Right.
People have viewpoints and stereotypes of people. So, it's just hard to believe. Many of the folks that we have here are the best teachers in the world. They know what it's like to be demeaned, to be devalued, to be excluded, to not have the opportunity to live in society. A lot of the civil rights movement from Martin Luther King, is the premise of what we've done.
Who feels it knows it, right?
Right. It's a population. Truly, the population we're talking about are a group of human beings that truly have been the group that have been excluded. And a lot of communities now throughout the country, we're bringing our people back in, but there's still a subsection of human beings, because of challenges, may not have some of those opportunities because they may have more extreme needs, but it requires more skill, perhaps more patience to get people through that so they can come into the community and live a life.
Right. Navigating those challenges, right, that's being faced by the individuals with, as you mentioned, intellectual disabilities and co-occurring behavioral health challenges, it requires a comprehensive and community-driven approach. What does this comprehensive and community-driven approach entail?
Well, first, when people come to us, like I'll give an example. This is more of an extreme case, but we had taken a young man into the organization that had lived in a psychiatric hospital for 9 months. Very traumatized. He had just witnessed the murder of his brother. And he was scared, but the way he manifests his fear and his trauma was screaming and yelling and hearing voices and this and this and that. So, of course, this was an extremely sensitive situation. So the first thing we did is we found a community that we believed he'd feel comfortable living in. And what we did in that particular situation is we got to know neighbors, so the neighbors would not be afraid. We got to know some of the stores within the community to say, hey, this person, so he could not feel excluded. And what we ended up in this situation is we identified a team of human being staff that stood by his side through all of his behaviors and traumas and began to have him feel safe and began to understand comprehensively what does he need in terms of therapy or perhaps a medication to calm him down, how staff can talk to him. So it was a real deep process of evaluating his need, making sure that he got the right kind of mental health support, behavioral support, making sure that the staff was trained to not respond to when he was afraid and how he shouted and what have you. And it was a process that perhaps it took a few years, but today he's living in the community. He's got buddies. He's got roommates. He's got girlfriend. It's just
beautiful.
When you give a person a chance. We have supported people that came to us that were locked up, not because of a criminal thing, but because when they were teenagers, they had challenging types of behaviors and they were sent away. And, we had one gentleman who's a teacher with us who communicates what it was like. First of all, he didn't have family support. He felt like nobody loved or cared about him. The state sends him away to a locked juvenile facility. He didn't do anything wrong. He was a man with an intellectual disability. And what happened to him was they used psychotropic medications to really kind of dull his senses. So when we had him come to us, when he was returned back, he was a very angry person and he was scared. And he didn't want anybody around him because he just felt that if you were an adult, you were going to hurt him. Who is an adult is somebody that's, and he would do things that were very, very intense. And a lot of our employees were afraid initially. Long and the short is we found 2 or 3 employees that were mentors to this man. We developed an approach in terms of what we needed to do. Medically, we had to make sure he was medically safe. We had to look at, very deep assessments about what triggers off his behaviors, what we can do to show him safety skills. Time. Today, after years, he's now living in a home with, it's called a host family. No more, he's no longer in need of some of the medications. He's no longer a person that is used kind of like aggression to communicate. And he now teaches what it's been like and what happened along the way and what it took inside of him to give himself that chance to live a life. And I mean, what a life story that man
is. Right.
And, so I think the most important thing is everybody's human. Everybody has their own interests and needs. And what we try to understand what that is and provide that person-centered approach to reaching people and then developing what they need around them so they can become active members, working in the community, contributing to the community, and more importantly, people that can be leaders in the community. It's stereotypes. Oh, they have an intellectual disability or they have this condition. They can't do anything. When you live
opportunities.
When you live through some of those types of histories, you gain strength of character.
Absolutely.
And so I think so that's how we become active members, by eliminating the myth, eliminating the stereotypes, getting people to feel comfortable in a community, getting to know the neighbors, getting to have people working. So it's just a person that could be your neighbor now.
Yeah, it's like a customized living arrangements, which you mentioned. Customized living arrangements for adults with developmental disabilities. Yeah, you're doing quite a handful, Dr. Bennett. You initiated the IAG because you witnessed the mistreatment of persons with disabilities, right? And so you went on to fight a case and won a federal lawsuit against discriminatory ordinances that violated the Fair Housing Act, the FHA, and the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, in 2020. Am I correct?
Yes.
And then a few years later, in 2022, the judicial system ordered the city of Springfield to pay a total of $293,000 in damages for the discriminatory violation. So they were penalized for doing such a horrific job. Did this lawsuit bring about any legislative changes in the end?
I hope so. So just to give a little background, prior to that, there were people with autism living in their own homes in the community, and the village shut them down. And what they were trying to use as an example, well, there may be a house down the block where other people with disabilities live, and you can't have, there's a distance, you can't have more than
600.
Yeah, that was, so
600 feet. That is absolutely preposterous.
And I'm like, how could this be a group home? One person lives in this home. So long and the short of it is there was 2 or 3 persons living in their own in homes that we provided 24-hour supports, and the
right.
shut them down. So what ended up happening was there was a beautiful home that 3 men rented from a community landlord. It was the best partnership you could ever understand. One of the men had lived in a state institution, and his sister called me up saying, please help. I don't want my brother to be so far away from me. I want my brother to have a life. I want to be near him. I want to be able for him to experience this life. So what we did together and the other families is we designed and created this home where everybody got together and worked together to get the home customized, because these were men that were in wheelchairs and needed mobility.
Right.
Home for 2.5 years. One day they come home, there's a big sign on the front lawn saying that there's going to be a hearing to determine whether they have the right to live in their home. Now, I want you to, they had a big public sign on their lawn saying that they have to go to a public hearing to determine if 3 men and their guardians who signed this lease, who've been wonderful neighbors, who never did anything that caused anybody grief. 2 men were African Americans, 1 was a Caucasian man, so there's always some speculation about that as well. And we just felt, and I felt, enough is enough. And so we went to the zoning board, and what people in the community said about these men and the staff would just make you livid. Making comments about employees driving in the neighborhood, making comments about these men being outside, just horrific, prejudicial, nasty comments.
Just for being humans.
Because they were living in a house that caused no issue.
For being human.
Well, there's a van in the driveway. So, in fact, we actually had to prove that we had less cars in the driveway than neighbors, because they were coming up with the most ridiculous reasons why these men couldn't live in the home. So then what happened was I said, okay, enough. And so the zoning board said, shut them down. Their home, their lease, shut them down. It goes to the council, shut them down. So the holiday season, December, the time when everybody's supposed to treat each other with dignity and respect, these men had an order from the city to be moved. Now, mine was really hard to get this home, because these were people that needed accessibility, because they needed wheelchairs to ambulate in their home. So I just about had it, because I knew that other people were being discriminated against. And again, they were saying that these 3 people aren't really a family. Just so our audience.
Define a family. What is a family? It's not just blood.
Will not have that right. And people not be able to rent their own home because maybe down the 2 blocks away, there may be a few other people with disabilities. So I contacted, a civil rights attorney, and we filed the suit. And the only reason why I did this, I didn't want them to lose their home. This was their home, and they were crying. It was just So what ended up happening was, in this particular case, the United States Department of Justice, Office of Civil Rights, became aware of the case. I know, because one that lived there was part of the state class action consent decree, because it was mandated to move people out of these large settings to give them a right to live in the community. So one of those was part of that suit. So United States Department of Justice Civil Rights then joined the case, represented some of the individuals. IAG sued as the organization driving the case. And I will share with you that we got the injunction. It was determined discriminatory, but the city fought it every step of the way. Every step of the way, the city went to the appellate courts saying, that's not, we won, the individuals won. So the Seventh Circuit said, this is discrimination. You can't do this. Violation of the ADA. This is in violation of zoning. As we speak, it's still not settled. This is since 2015. So what this did, this case, from what I'm being, told, because, lawyers hear all of us, that this case set precedents that towns can't use these discriminatory zoning ordinances to include human beings. Right. Those types of codes are in violation of the ADA, the Fair Housing Act, zone. So that's what this case did. And what breaks my heart is that it took this kind of effort to just let people live a life. And this was not the only village, because we support so many people in so many kinds of communities in so many different areas. There's so many different ways that people like to discriminate. And they'll discriminate with a smile on their face. But the things that we do and what we advocate for is, oh, no, you're not. Oh, no, you're not. And so we've had other towns that try to block people, but we know very passionately what to do to assure the rights of human beings. Right. You know what? Case that's great, because really it's just ridiculous what people do. This is a population of humans, just like we all. You don't pity, you embrace. You don't give handouts, you give a hand up. Better, yeah. I mean, say that so many of the people that we support, they're the leaders. I mean, can you imagine relying on people to help you that treat you terribly, or they demean you because they don't think you know any better, or you shouldn't be here? I mean, it takes. I mean, I'm a recipient of that. You have to be equipped. You have to be equipped in so many different ways to deal with those people that support unwelcome situations. Right. And to make sure that the people that are there supporting those folks understand it, because they're not their role to take over power. They're there to support. They're there to help persons achieve their best life's dreams. Now, some folks have more severe disabilities, like people with autism or others. There's ways of doing that as well. Right. By watching, observing, and knowing each and every person. So again, people first is our motto. Advocacy. Absolutely. And there's so many situations as we speak. We're really strong in our advocacy to have folks continue living where they do today. This reminds me of the Innocence Project that I recently came across, because I mentioned I'm from Jamaica, so I wasn't too au fait with it. And their mantra is, and I quote, working to free the innocent, prevent wrongful convictions, create fair, compassionate, and equitable systems of justice for everyone. And this just goes so far to say that really and truly, Dr. Bennett, your work, it just simply highlights the injustice that marginalized and underrepresented groups
have to deal with on a daily
Oh,
basis,
well, that,
whether it's due to their ethnicity, whether it's due to lack of financial wherewithal, their physical or mental disabilities. It's quite disheartening, to say the least. A recipient from the Innocence Project, Brian Banks. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but there was a movie that was made from his story, and he was wrongfully accused, and he lost 11 years of his life being incarcerated. And he's quoted as saying, "It is crucial to remember that none of us are immune to the grips of our legal system, that we could very well find ourselves or a loved one standing before the steels of injustice. And it is in these moments that we will recognize the profound responsibility that we bear as spiritual beings and as humans to seek a more compassionate, more ethical, and more moral path."
absolutely. And
He said our obligation is not merely to ourselves, but to our diaspora, to create a system that reflects the values that we hold dear. It is our moral and ethical obligation to yearn for a system that uplifts, that rehabilitates, and that safeguards to protect the principles of fairness. And I think it's just so potent and very, very applicable to exactly what the words that are coming out of your mouth, and not just the words that are coming out of your mouth, but the actions that you are, displaying towards other human beings.
2 points I want to make in addition to what you're saying is that in any time in our life, we may be that person that may need support as well. So we don't know what's going to happen when we get older.
Exactly.
Bills, if we have to have caregivers, or if we ever got in a car accident, it could happen to any one of us at any time to have a disability on that. And you would want people to treat you with that humanity as well. And so, when we meet with our folks, it could happen. We can't be so arrogant to think that couldn't happen to us one day. And we want people to treat us with that same level of dignity. So I also want to make is we also support youth that have been incarcerated, not disabled, but we support that come out of that child welfare disability.
Wow.
Same philosophy, getting to know people, getting to know what they need, and giving them a chance, because these are human beings that have been very damaged through severe abuse and trauma. And so we have equally strong support program to advocate for those folks. Some of the people that come to us, they may have been in child welfare institutions, they may have been homeless, they may have been in juvenile, and our whole emphasis with this support program, bring people back to the community, small, maybe 1 or 2 people living together, helping them regain their internal strength to keep wanting to try. I mean, surrounding them with counseling and therapies and all kinds of things. And so we have an equally intense, passionate support program for that population as well. So I just want to put that in there because, we believe that all human beings deserve whatever we can do, not that we're better than, but we are there to support so we can all learn from each other.
Absolutely.
So population that's what we want to do. But what's unique about what we do is we provide supports to populations of people that are the most, by other people's definitions, very intense challenges. They shouldn't be around because they can't do it. That's the commonality of IAG.
Wow. Very, very, very admirable. And this is the reason why we're having this conversation, because it's quite admirable.
Because it's not that I'm just, we're very surprised about, but, we're very grateful. We're in Washington, D.C., we're in throughout the state of Illinois. And so we strongly believe that if people need support, there's a way of doing it. and you need to be sensitive. We are sensitive to cultures and communities, because people have the right to live where they want to, and be given the support that they need to live successfully.
Absolutely. And it brings us to the core question of what is the impact of advocacy in general, and who do you believe should get involved?
People who care, people that want to support and make a difference, and even get to know people that you may have been afraid of or think, So I think that, I think part of being integrated into a community is getting to know people, befriending someone, getting to know a person with a disability, not to be afraid. I mean, so who should be involved? Everyone.
Everyone, because advocacy allows everyone, all individuals, to have their voices heard in the public sphere, attracting attention from politicians, the media, and the high-profile individuals around the world. And by advocating for a cause, individuals are able to spotlight their perspective to the wider community, which is exactly what you're doing, and act as a catalyst for change, which is exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. We've always saw ourselves as social justice advocates, change. We had persons in communities leasing their own homes in 1999. That was unheard of, because traditional group homes, large homes, these people can't do such a thing. We've never believed that. We also believe that everyone should have that chance. Nobody, because of whatever their issues are, should be sent away to live, that they're not good enough to be in the community. They have too many problems. We're like, that's ridiculous. So, embrace people. And, sometimes the way I look at this is some of those folks are probably the most interesting, because they have the best way of communicating uniquely, right?
Very, very so. And you have to be in tuned with their form of communication. With almost 30 years, Dr. Bennett, almost 30 years, because you look nothing like it. You are so stunning. You're gorgeous.
45.
Oh, wow. Look at that. So are you able to put a figure on the number of lives you've actually impacted?
I don't think about that, because just don't think about that. I've always, when I was young, I used to be a school director when I was, and, it was the same philosophy at that time, because at that time kids were excluded out of school systems, and they always, they were cast aside. They had special schools, and people were, they were excluded from educational systems. So that's where I started.
Right. And
so 30 years that I started IAG. This didn't exist before it was started. So it was new, and I decided to start this organization because there was just too many people that were left out. There were too many people nobody wanted to help. And it started with children who were from the child welfare system that were really challenging. They were had a lot of behavioral problems. The state did not want them to be sent away, and we wrapped these kids around, and these were some really situations that were heartbreaking in terms of the intellectual, mental health needs that these kids had. So our model was to surround them with whatever supports they need, provide them with that guidance. Some of the kids we worked with early on had 30 foster homes a year, and our teams just kept following them around. And then what ended up happening was many of those kids grew up, and their histories were so challenging that they couldn't get services when they became adults. That none of the current groups wanted to help them because they didn't want to deal with all that. And, a lot of the groups didn't want to deal with kids that didn't have families, or they didn't want to work with kids that had behavioral problems or mental health problems or psychiatric problems. And we decided that's the group we're going to focus in on. We're going to make that the best for some population that most people may, that's not their problem. So that's how all this started, was, just really creating that opportunity for those. Not that everybody we have here falls in that category. I mean, that's not what I'm saying, but that was the birth. We have, right now, people are so happy and successful that we support, that if you were to meet them, you wouldn't even know which is the best. So when you say how many people, I don't think
You
about it.
can.
No, because
Yeah,
I
I totally get it.
it's just that people are living the life, and I'm so grateful for that. I love it.
Um,
I just love people, and I love people.
mhm.
I just love it. I mean, I just love being able to provide whatever leadership there is to create customized environments so people could just live and have to live their life. It's just, I can't explain it. It's just a wonderful thing, to be able to have that impact. And it's
That's great.
not easy. It's not easy.
I know,
No,
and it brings me to my next question. How is
hard.
the organization, um, how are your initiatives being supported, and what mechanisms do you use to attain funding?
Well, these are the people that are in this environment are part of a home and community based waiver. It's part of the Medicaid uh, funding for, there's two categories, the elderly and disabled. This falls under the disabled category. And
Mm-hmm.
we do get funding from different state agencies or the district. Uh, in Illinois, for many years, it was a highly underfunded type of program. One of the major issues has always been the staff that support these folks have always been so underpaid. You're responsible for human life, and you're getting paid $8, $9 an hour. Um, that's not what it is today. Today, and one of the philosophies that we've always had, and now it's jump, 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 jump. So we're paying people a nice wage because we always believed, and I did, people need to be treated with dignity and respect, and that means for the employees money and providing them a nice wage and opportunities for growth, and make this a spirit that we're here as a team working with all kinds of people as a mission, that mission to affect that change. So it's hard. Just think about when you're supporting all kinds of people with all kinds of needs, and we're in over 200 environments, 200. So you
Wow.
make sure that the staff that are supporting these folks are properly trained, they understand how to treat people correctly, making sure that they have the skills. So if somebody doesn't speak, they have to learn how to use sign language or communications. If
Mm-hmm.
somebody move because they're in a wheelchair, they have to learn how to lift or help feed somebody. If somebody has trauma, they may have to learn what that means in terms of what triggers off a response from fear of their background. So there's so much. Those things are very, very hard. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard. And to make sure that the people supporting the folks are themselves doing a good job. And
Right.
then the funding is always challenging to make sure that you could find enough staff to do what you want to do and empower people to want to continue what they want to do. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very comprehensive. It's 24 hours a day. Human
Mm.
stop having problems because it's a weekend or
Right.
holiday. In fact, it's worse
Or
on
8 o'clock at night.
morning, noon, or 7. And
Right.
least expect it's going to happen. So, I mean, the complexities of this um, type of organization is enormous.
Mm. Do
I,
you collaborate with any other groups?
well, yes, because part of what I'm so proud of is that we have many of our individuals now are volunteering themselves, feed the starving.
Mm.
They're in different working, and so there's partnerships with different jobs. There's what we encourage is people become the givers, not the receivers. So we
Mm.
that are actually devoting and volunteering their time in nursing homes who try, we believe that everyone has the ability to contribute. So in
Mm.
each community that we're in, there's partnerships with the local businesses, there's
Mm-hmm.
partnerships with different churches, because it's where people live. And so it's not contrived, it's natural.
Mm-hmm.
we have some of our persons are doing their own little podcasts or they're volunteering. I mean, we've had some of our individuals getting involved in their own campaigns, politically. We've
Mm, mm,
the Black Lives Matter movement, women's marches. What we do is encourage our folks that we support to be advocates as well, which is a very unique thought because sometimes we all just pity. Oh, no, no, no. And so the partnerships are really intense, and it's all throughout different communities.
wow. What would you say the prerequisites? What are the prerequisites to getting access to the IAG services for those persons who actually need it?
I think that one prerequisite is get to know, what location people live in, because this is
Mm-hmm.
right now we're not everywhere. We would certainly entertain if there's other places that would like this to support, we would consider. But in Illinois, in order to get referred to our organization, it has to go through the local case management groups,
Mm-hmm.
or they contact us directly, and then we help create the environments. In Washington D.C., for an example, they have a process there as well where they have to go to their local case management entities and describe what they need. And those folks can then get referred to the organization. So I think that, several ways is going to local case managers, or we also have the website that you know about that can provide some direction as well.
You have been doing you've been doing a lot. Um, and you seem to be very, very involved. Has this work taken any toll on you, if any at all? And how do you go about maneuvering that?
I will say it certainly has taken a toll, because when you care deeply, it hurts when people don't do well, or when you have situations with staff that may not go the way you want. I think that I've seen so much, truly, that I don't I don't sweat I don't sweat the small stuff these days, because when I'm so grateful, for an example, that I can walk, that I have the ability to talk, and I have food in my stomach, and those basic things of life I am so grateful for. I think that
Mm.
what it's take is I feel the pain of others, and
You're an empath.
that's really,
An empath you are.
I it's hard. And sometimes I get upset that I have certain opportunities or privileges others don't.
Hmm.
Kind of response that I have. Sometimes if the phone rings, I jump because, like, oh no, what happened? Because human conditions, as I shared earlier, it doesn't stop because of the weekend. So the toll it's taken is the empathy, or what you feel that what other people have lived through. Understanding every day how blessed I am that I could do things others can't, and being
Hmm.
small things. It's not about the money at all. It's just about being so grateful and just talking to you today. And some people don't have that. I also feel grateful that I've been able to utilize whatever abilities I have to make a difference for others. But I also will say the toll it has had is that you get saddened sometimes when you see certain things, and it triggers off a response sometimes. And then I get upset when I see people that worry about stupid stuff, because I'm like, you have no idea, right?
I know.
I hate to say it that way, but it's like, really? If you only
Yeah.
know,
Especially what you're kind of being exposed to over the years. You've seen the challenges and you know what that looks like, feels like, tastes like, smells like, you see it. You might not be living it in a particular
but
way,
you,
but there's a framework for you to go by, and you can appreciate what that entails.
example, one of the men that I met early on, and we provide supports, was thrown into a nursing home at 8 years old. He lived in a nursing home because he had cerebral palsy.
Mm,
I worked for the state, and he didn't speak, but he can communicate through gestures. And through our communications and love for one another, he got out of the institution and we helped him live in an apartment in his home. And I asked him, and again, he communicated that what he was most excited about when he left those settings was that he was able to get a cup of brewed coffee. Because when he lived where he used to live, it was just, those big whatever tanks. And he was able to choose the food that he liked. Because, he liked a certain type of food that he could never get when he lived in those settings. So just think of it, I was like, oh my God,
We take certain things for granted, that's for sure.
Coffee was
I know.
And to be able to go outside and smell the fresh air, so, it's a reality. That was his life. And it just hits you that I remember him, communicating that he was afraid to go to sleep at night because he didn't want to get hurt by certain things, by certain people. And it's just trauma that it hurts, and he was a very angry person because he was so hurt. He didn't, I remember he didn't want to live. And so, to try to support somebody through that pain, it was challenging. He did end up getting his own place to live. He was grateful that he was safe and he was able to have those choices. But, the fact that he had to live like that at all just breaks your heart.
Anyone with a soul, it would break their heart. Florence Scovel Shin. She's a new age writer, and she mentioned in one of her books, The Game of Life, that no man is an enemy, no man is a friend, but every man is your teacher. What life lessons have you been taught as CEO and co-founder of IAG by both your team and those persons who you have been supporting over the years?
What life lessons that if you have a will, there's a way. Really important. That if you care deeply enough and passionate enough, you could make that change for people. You have to be courageous. I think what I've seen over the years is how many people are so non-courageous because to fight or to advocate or to get people sometimes what they desire. People sometimes are afraid to speak the truth about what's necessary because, there's a lot of systems involved. So life lessons.
Yeah, you have to be badass like Dr. Charlene Bennett.
Is too. Some people I know they're tough when you have someone standing in front of a person with a shield. What I have learned is that most people are not courageous. I don't mean disrespect to anybody, but it does take a certain level of chutzpah able to affect change, and you're not always going to be liked for it. That's sometimes a hard lesson because everybody likes to be liked, but not when you affect change. You may tick somebody off. You're not always going to be popular, but you're doing the right thing because it's for the right reasons.
So that's what courage looks like for you.
Being able to stand up for the right reasons and not being afraid to speak the truth for human. It's a lot easier to go with the flow, but it doesn't mean it's the right thing to be doing.
So that's what you've been taught. What have you taught them in return? Both your team and those that you have been supporting.
I think the one thing that I think there was a situation, I don't know if I should put this on the podcast or not, but we had a gentleman that came to us, and you could decide if you want to keep this, came to us, and he had been a person that used the N-word a lot to our employees. And it was horrible. And so one of the employees, who's now came to me and I said, this is just not acceptable. We went together with this man, and I can't explain how we did it, but he and I together, an African-American man and myself, just went and discussed with this man. We're not going to tolerate that abuse. We're not going to tolerate that disrespect. And this is a man who came to us. That was language he
That,
used. A man
but
with
but this is somebody who actually needed to be supported, right?
right. He was a client,
Wow.
and he just thought it was funny because that's what he was taught. And I was so proud of the person who came to me because that was courageous. And we worked. I mean, this man, this individual knew me, and we together, the employee and I, and just did a life lesson on the spot about disrespect. It's not appropriate, and that never happened since then. So I
Mhm.
think what I try to do is understand not just the person supported, but staff, what people go through and what we can do together. We may not live your life, but we can try to accept and understand together to make that change and difference. And to me, that was huge. And the other persons, because why should a person with a disability get away with that either? That's inappropriate. And
Right.
don't think that should, oh, they have just excuse that. No, no,
Yeah. Being disabled doesn't make you
it doesn't
stupid.
used to be a jerk.
Right. It
And
doesn't give you,
yes,
right,
so
ammunition, the license to be a jerk.
so
Exactly.
I what I don't know if I've taught others, but it's trying to get to understand each and every person so you can make that difference, regardless if it's an individual supported, your staff. It's really understanding the depth of that human nature to try to understand to be that leader to help make that change. And it's
Right.
the person with a disability, because if you've got staff supporting that person, they may have issues too. So another example would be, and this is maybe not on track, but if you have a woman that came to work for us who may have been a history of domestic violence, right, and had a
Mhm.
trauma in her life, well, we want to make sure that she feels courageous enough to let us know, so we don't have her supporting anybody that may have had some of that aggressive background, so she doesn't get triggered off. So it's really, I think, the people that learn from me is it's okay to be who you are. Come and let's
Mm.
work together to make it work for every one of us. And I
Mhm.
that's what and to acknowledge others. And that's the other thing that I think I try to do is appreciate the people that have had that impact. They should be said thank you. To appreciate, to embrace those courageous people and acknowledge them, because that's what it is. I would say that so many of the employees that support people are the heroes as well.
Mhm.
They're in the trenches, never getting acknowledged by society. Oh, a lot of people look down in that population. They're the true heroes because they're
Right.
they're there
In
every
the
day
trenches. Mhm.
make that change. So I think
Mhm.
people learn from me. I hope it's that empathy and understanding that we can all help each other to affect life change.
Right. Who supports you?
Ah, my dog.
Who supports the supporter?
Well, I would say that over the years, I've learned a lot of self. I exercise, and I just, I do a lot of meditation, and I just feel an internal strength. I know when to chill. I have a circle of family and friends, and that's how I try to do it. And I think that when you have a mission as deeply as I do, that kind of fuels the fire. And when I find myself getting overwhelmed or depressed or whatever, I do a lot of different things just to kind of take care of myself.
Mm. What's a what's your most what's your most brutal life lesson?
My brutal life, that life's not always fair,
Mm.
that not everybody, well, yeah, that life's not always fair, and that there's a lot of mean spirited people out there, and
Mm.
that and a lot of people don't want change. A lot of people like to, and I can say, there's times when you try to advocate and people don't care because they like the comfort of being discriminatory, and
Mm.
that is a life lesson. That sometimes hard work doesn't always pay off, but you got to keep trying. And another
True.
life lesson is there are some people that no matter how hard you try, you're not going to reach. And so that's been really hard too, because you think you could make a difference for everyone, and there's times that it just doesn't, it's not happening. There's going to
Mm.
be situations out there that it hurts, but people are going to turn or not appreciate it or be difficult, and that hurts like heck. So
Mm.
that you
Hmm.
going to welcome.
Yeah. What's the one thing that you prioritized when you were younger, and as you've gotten older, you realize that it wasn't that important?
Hmm. I've always felt this way, so it's hard to kind of say. I never really, I, I prioritize my education. I prioritize creating change. Um, I never was one that spent a lot of money on myself. That's probably maybe a disadvantage. A lot of people take vacations all the time. I never did that. I think one of the things that I've learned along the way is you're not always going to be liked by everybody. And so
Mm-hmm.
that early, when you're younger, you want everyone to love you, and it hurts when they don't. I didn't understand. Well, I did, but in fact, you can have a lot of people being jealous or do things that are very cruel. And so that was, you know, when I was young, I didn't understand that. I do today. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they're cry over it these days because there are times that people just don't like you because you are that type of person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of prioritized before. I always wanted to be liked by everybody and try to, and now I've learned whatever, you have to learn to accept yourself and do what's right and not worry about whether people
What
like you.
other people think. That's
For some,
right.
this because you are who you are. I've always thought differently and been different.
Mm-hmm.
Bothered me that I just couldn't think like other people, and that bothered me, and I always prioritizing, or maybe I should try to be like it. So I just gave.
Oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. As we head to the end of our of our session, Dr. Bennett, it's been an absolute delight to have you. What are some of the core tools, both manual and technological, that the organization used to drive its success?
Well, the tools sounds odd is good people.
I was just about to say, you've been saying that
Good
human resources is a really good tool, right?
people that share your mission, that are people, because we have a real what I love it is just the spirit of people that we all work with, because they're advocates also. So
Right.
the tools is trying, and that's hard to find leadership. you know
Mm-hmm.
the bell curve is only standard deviations above the norm. It's trying to find other like-minded change agents that are going to give that commitment, because that's a challenge, because there are some folks today that only want to work certain hours. They don't have the time. They don't want to deal with things off hours. They don't want to, I mean, it's hard. So I think the tool is finding like-minded people that are willing to put their all in the mission, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and having people that complement each other, because of course there's computers and technology. We love the creative arts, so one of the tools is always finding the creativity of people, because we have artists here, we have dancers here, so those tools are exceptionally helpful. Finding those like-minded people that make life fun with it. I think that's really key. And then finding technical people that can, because you have to still pay the bills, you still have to, have brilliant minded, accounting people to keep the numbers going. So I think number one is human people to fit in a role that pulls it all together. Uh,
Right.
say is the most important tool. And then thinking outside the box in terms of how we use people's strengths. One of the things we don't do is, if let's say somebody comes to IG and they thought they'd be better in this role, but after getting to know them, you have this, and this skill. Let's create the job to use your skills. So I think
Right.
is having the insight and fortitude to recognize the gifts of people, and then customizing a job to encourage the gift. And
Right.
that's a tool. And the other tool that I think has been exceptionally important is we find talent all the time within the workforce. And we
Mm.
have people that rise up to different levels. When they come to us, they're like, I'm just this. No, you're not just anything. So I think the tool is also recognizing the human spirit and skills and
Mhm.
thinking outside the box and how people can contribute.
I think the thing is society tend to subject you into a tiny box, and mental, you're equipped to think that way, and you're programmed to think that way of yourself, and you put limitations on
You're a
yourself.
smart woman, because I know there's
So
person that I would say, you need to do this. You are so, no, I'm not. So there's some
right.
people here started out at a certain level. And I remember, like, our director of payroll came out as
Mm,
support personnel, and now she heads up payroll. And
wow.
like, I can't. Yes, you
Yeah,
not.
because limitations is set, and we are programmed that way. So when you have the likes of you, Dr. Bennett, that can help to empower and to, as you say, you're not just advocating for those who are disabled, but you're advocating as well
There's
for
so
for,
many.
for people to,
Right. So that's
right,
part of the
to
spirit.
amplify their potential, right? Their capabilities. So that's very
That's
important for,
the spirit for so. And so, I just as much love seeing people, creating and themselves growing and growing, and people never thought so, because we don't think traditionally here. We think
yeah,
very outside the box.
love that. You act local, but you think local. No, how we go? How we go? You think local, act global, but think local. How we go?
We,
One of those mantras.
we all over the world, IAG, by the way.
Right.
And so I think that's what I'm most excited about. I love getting to know people from different cultures and backgrounds. I am just so into all of that.
I can see that in your personality. It's
Love it.
bubbling over, and I love that. It's coming out in the podcast. I love that. um,
Appreciate it.
for anyone who may need access to your services, to the services of Individual Advocacy Group, IAG, where can they find you?
Well, our I think our webpage is www.iagcares.com would be one. And
Mhm.
I think that would be probably the best way, is just getting in touch with us through that website.
Okay. Are there any other messages that you would care to bring across to the audience?
I would say, I hope that you got to understand that people with, people that you may have thought in the past were less than, or, had a disability that could not do much. Get rid of that myth. Everyone's a human being, and everyone has the right to participate and live in the community. And with the right kind of support, people can. And your life would be enriched getting to know people that may have a disability or other types of issues, because everybody's people first. And it's just a blessing to get to know people of all types of backgrounds, and all kinds of races, all kinds of needs. It's a blessing that will help you grow as a human being as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Love, Dr. Bennett, transcends national boundaries. Would you agree?
Yeah.
The essence of what you're doing at IAG for persons with disability, providing this holistic approach through health and wellness, um, whether through dance or yoga or doing a course, it's it's literally quite suitable for every human being. It's a culmination of the fundamental basics for human rights and dignity. One shouldn't have to be placed in a special category. One just needs to be human.
You said it. You
One just needs to be human.
Well, great that you reached out. I appreciate what you're doing. You're remarkable. So you're sitting there complimenting me, but look at you. What a woman. I love
Oh,
that. And
thank you.
they will meet.
You know what? I hope so. I'm sure we will. One of these days, we definitely will.
Well, thank you
We
so much.
definitely will. If you haven't done so, it's been, like I said, it's been an absolute delight having you here with us, sharing all the work that you're doing for persons with disabilities and those who are without, you know. Um, if you haven't done so already, people, please subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode of Impact 360. Cheers. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and for joining us. Thank you.